everybody. I wanted to hop on here and talk to you about how to get ready for a really strong year of math for a couple reasons. One is the time of year. Right now, a lot of us are getting ready to go back, or maybe you've just gone back. But also because I talk to so many homeschool parents, particularly moms, where there's some worries about math and you're concerned about how the year is going to go. But I feel like a lot of us just kind of live in that anxiety and we don't do anything about it. And I think that preparing and following some of the tips that I'm going to share with you can really help you kind of like harness that anxiety to prepare and then move forward with peace instead of just kind of living in that. So I feel like that helps me. So if you have some thoughts of like, I don't know how this year's going to go, hopefully this video will really help you. And even if you're just excited and you can't wait to start, I think a lot of what I'm going to share can make a big difference. It's pretty simple stuff, but I have just noticed that simple things done at the beginning so that we get started on the right path make a huge difference. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to recommend to you is that you start by taking stock of last year. Okay, so you might have already done this. A lot of times I think we've done this mentally, but we haven't done it in writing. So I'm actually becoming more and more drawn to like writing out things by hand because it seems to be getting me off my phone a little bit more and helping me process stuff. But I'll leave that up to you. I'd recommend doing it in writing, but just taking a moment to think through, did math go well last year? And a lot of times we generalize and we're like, it was a disaster, or we're like, it was great. And we don't think through a little more detailed, what parts went well? What do you think was successful about it? What were the highlights? And then if there were problems, trying to be specific. Was it really the whole year or was it the unit on long division? Was the whole thing a disaster or was it just maybe the curriculum or the way the co-op class was structured? A lot of times I like to dialogue with my kids about this, my older kids, especially when we're not in the heat of the moment. And so the year is over and we're saying, hey, I remember that we had some frustrations last year. What do you think was really challenging for you that you'd like to see be different? And a lot of times they share things that I'm in a better place to receive when we are not during the school year. Now, I'll be honest with you, math tends to be our glowing victory in our house because I love it. So I just want to be clear about that. But we do this with our other subjects too, right? So it's not like I can't relate. And of course, we have our pain points in our homeschool. So you take stock of that, right? And especially when you're putting it in writing, it helps us think about how we're going to make changes because it is so simple to be frustrated, get to May by the skin of our teeth, we're done, we put it away, we just want to do summer, and then we come into another school year and we do the same thing rather than making changes. So even just taking that moment and pausing. The other thing I'd say is, I know I recommended that you talk to your kids, but I have found talking to my spouse to be very grounding, and a lot of times I'm doing this, thinking through everything, and he can say in one sentence, like, well, I think this was the problem. And if I just listen to that, there's a lot of blessing in that. Once you've taken stock of how things went last year, I want you to get organized. Now, this is definitely one of those points that feels very simple, but it makes a huge difference. So you want to get organized for the year now so that you are set and ready to go. So let me show you what I mean by get organized. So the first thing you want to do is gather your books. So I'll just use Apology of Math Level 4 as the example. You want to have your book and you want to flip through it. I actually, of course, you the mom or you the homeschooling parent will probably have done this, but I actually recommend also that your kids flip through it quickly, just doing a quick like looking at everything. But so many times flipping through the curriculum, something jumps out at me that I didn't realize or I didn't notice before that kind of gets me ready to teach it better. The next thing I want to say is that you should designate a math area. Now, we're homeschoolers, okay? We homeschool on the couch, on the floor, at the dining room table, in the kitchen, while we're in the car, right? I mean, this is how it works. This is the beauty of it. I do think for math, whenever possible, doing math in the same area and having a designated area where you keep the math stuff is very important. So we keep our math stuff on their school shelf, and then we keep the supplies they need there with them. So if you have an older kid, you've got a textbook, graph paper, the calculator all together. When I used to tutor, well, I still tutor, but when I was tutoring as the majority of what I was doing with my time, this part about getting organized and getting your supplies together was again and again one of the biggest things I did for students. They were lost in their math, but one of the big problems was they couldn't find their book, or they constantly didn't know where their calculator was. They were in notebook number 5 because they kept not finding things. So I would always take time during a 1-hour tutor session to say, where's your shelf? Where's your stuff? That kind of thing. With younger kids, obviously you're helping them with that, but not losing that time of finding the supplies. And one thing that sometimes homeschool kids can do is if they can't find a supply, they might skip something, and then that leads to a lot of issues. So I have seen so many issues with graphing working with homeschool kids. And when I've talked to the families, talked to the kids, a lot of times the issue was they couldn't find the graph paper, or they couldn't find the gridded paper, and they would just skip the graphs, right? And I'm chuckling because this is the kind of thing I would have done as a student. And then we have this huge gap in their learning just because we couldn't find the graph paper. So let's not do that, right? Okay, so you have a designated area where you're keeping things. You as the parent have flipped through this. We're gonna have our kids flip through their books as well. And then you need to gather supplies. So how this would look with Apologia always makes this so easy. They do this with their science books as well. The last page, this is the teaching guide for Apologia. The last page is all the supplies you need for the year, okay? So I tear this out, and normally the first step I do is I go around my house and I'm just grabbing things, because at this point we have so much stuff, right? But I don't necessarily know where it is, especially with the middle of summer. So I'm grabbing things. I also might make a trip to the dollar store. I'm scanning ahead for things that are going to be really inconvenient to buy or go out and try to find in the middle of the year. I do this with our other subjects too. A quick look, where's the supply list for our science? What's our history? Is there some type of big project that I'm going to need something? Do I need a shoe box? Because then I can never find a shoe box because we don't buy shoes in boxes. We get them consignment. So anyways, that kind of thing. And then the key here is you are going to put all those supplies in a math bin. I have talked about this a bunch of times, but we keep our math supplies separate from our other school supplies and separate from other items in our house. So we have dice that are specific for math, and we keep them in the math bin, and this has saved so much time. I can provide lists of suggested supplies for different levels of math of what you might need, but it really varies based on your program. Like I said, Apologia, we list it very clearly. Most other programs will somewhere list specifically what you're going to need for the year. If you're taking a co-op class, I would take the time to email the teacher and ask. And even if they aren't prepared yet, it already gives them a signal that you are an engaged parent and you're looking ahead. Personally, I teach math at our co-op. I've done it for years. And I have appreciated the parent who's reached out to me and said, hey, graphing calculators are on sale right now. Is that what you're thinking? And normally I'm like, oh, thank you for the reminder. I meant to tell everybody this is what they need. They do need a protractor, because that's the other thing too, right? During the summer, a lot of these supplies go on sale. You can grab them for really cheap. And if you don't do it now, then you pay full price later. And that's annoying. Okay. Once you have gathered your supplies, another tip to do is to activate prior knowledge. So we have taken a break for the summer, many of us, right? And we're about to jump into another year, and we might not have even finished the past year in strength, right? It might have been sort of a limp to the end. So what we want to do is, if you kind of think of the running metaphor, we want to do some stretching. We want to stretch those math muscles and kind of get used to being in mathematical shape again. There's a lot of ways you can do this. Okay, one that is very achievable is picture books. And I recently did a whole video on math picture books. So this one I feel like is an easy win. Get a few math picture books out from the library, or maybe you order them, and just tell your kids, even if you haven't started school yet, hey, I want you to read a math picture book today. Maybe you even start the school year with some math picture books before you jump head first. You decide what it looks like to kind of stretch the muscles before we go headlong into the math pool of learning new stuff. Another way to activate prior knowledge or to stretch is to practice our facts. And if you know me, you know I'm going to say math games. All right. So I typically ease in August because I don't like the shock of like, woo, here we go. So we often start with reviewing some facts, using games, playing fishing for tens, reviewing our multiplication facts, and doing that for sort of a soft start as we get ready to go in again. Two other pretty easy ways to activate prior knowledge are to flip through your old math book and work with someone who's younger. So flipping through your old math book, I'm going to talk about flipping through your new math book, as I said earlier, but this one, I mean, this is not hard at all. You have that filled in book from last year, right? Or maybe their textbook from last year. And before you jump into the new one, just have them literally flip through it, and it jogs their memory because it feels like a long time ago, and they kind of go, oh yeah, we were doing multiplication, or oh yeah, I was working with polynomials. That helps to activate that prior knowledge. Another thing that you can do is have them work with someone younger. So this especially works when you have started the school year and you have, multiple grade levels. That's what I have this year, a 5th grader, a 3rd grader, and a kindergartner. So having my 3rd grader work with my kindergartner is perfect in terms of her, stretching those math muscles, or the 5th grader working with the 3rd grader and kind of reviewing the multiplication facts, that kind of thing. Okay, so you've activated prior knowledge, you got organized. Keep in mind with older kids, they can be helping you with this, right? You don't need to be scurrying around your house trying to find all these things. The last point I want to share with you is to make a plan. And this is especially if you think there might be problems. So if you have a child who really struggles with math, or the past year or two have been rough, I don't want you to head into another year just like fingers crossed it's going to be better. So you want to have some type of plan in place for how you're going to get help. Who are we going to call if we get stuck? And a lot of times, if you're in that scenario, just based on the many families that have reached out to me, you and your child is not a dynamic that's working great when they're stuck. So a lot of times it's a good idea to have somebody else lined up. I do the majority of our homeschooling, so dad would be an alternative tutor or helper. And so that's a very simple one of like, okay, I've already talked to my husband, and if my son's lost during the day, that night, he knows he's got to make it a priority to work on it and review it. Another option can be video resources like Khan Academy, where kids can look at it in a different way and review the concept. Or you have somebody lined up as outside help, someone who's a potential tutor, or someone in your homeschool network who you know is strong in math. Now, you really want to be having those conversations ahead of time. So what typically happens to me, because I'm like the math person in my group, which I'm totally fine with, is people are reaching out to me when they're in crisis. Like, we're totally lost. My daughter's been lost for 2 weeks. Can you help? That is a very tricky situation because I might not be available. This is coming out of the blue, and they probably should have gotten help sooner. What has worked a lot better is if a family reaches out to me, hey, we're headed into Algebra 2 this year. We think we've made these changes, but if we hit problems, do you think you would be available to tutor, that type of thing? And so now it's already on my radar. I'm checking in with them. Do you see what I'm saying? And think about your network, right? I have nieces and nephews. You better believe that if one of them was reaching out to me saying, do you think you'd be able to help me this year? I'm going to help them. So if you give people that heads up and you've already kind of thought through your network who might be able to help, then you're in a great place. The sooner the better, because you don't want to have your child be really lost by the time you reach out. That actually puts the tutor or the person you're calling in a tough spot. You can even, this is what Salman Khan did from Khan Academy, you can even be so proactive that you start the tutoring and the reinforcement before they get lost. Now that's kind of more with middle school, high school level than elementary, but you could still think about it. All right, so just a couple of the resources. I'm going to be putting some links below to the podcast I did with my mom about teaching math effectively, about back to school. As always, you can comment below. I love the comments. You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. If you want to send me messages directly, let me know your thoughts, your concerns, and your hopes and wishes for this year of math.